As usual, Taehyung lay in the bed, tossing and turning, his mind refusing to settle. The more he tried to close his eyes, the more vivid Wine's crying face flashed in his mind. Her tear-streaked cheeks, her quivering lips, it haunted him, sending a wave of anxiety through his chest. He groaned in frustration, letting out a sigh as he stared up at the ceiling, trying to make sense of the uneasy knot in his stomach. Why hasn't she come to meet Mom? It's been so long since I have last seen her. Mom doesn't even cry over her sorrows in front of me anymore. Is it because I refused to marry her? Did it hurt Mom that badly? But why the hell am I thinking about her? Am I missing her? He muttered to himself, frustrated. Taehyung felt an odd sense of emptiness. His mother used to talk about Wine constantly, always nudging him towards her, but now there was nothing. His heart swelled with a strange emotion as he thought about marrying Wine, the very idea stirring something deep within him. But then, just as quickly, he shot up in bed, his eyes wide in shock. No, I'm supposed to be annoyed by her. She is immature and childish and her tears are annoying. He reminded himself why he refused to marry her in the first place. Yet the emotion swelling inside him didn't match his reasons. He then heard a voice in his heart. You know you have been fooling yourself with these reasons. You have always liked her, but she didn't pay any attention to you, which irritated you. What if, just like your mom is begging to marry you, her parents do the same? You'll lose her forever. Taehyung's heartbeat raced violently. No, Wine can't get married, she's mine. He murmured, pushing the covers off and getting out of bed, determined to ask his mom about Wine, maybe to hear some reassurance that everything was fine. He stepped out of his room, moving quietly down the hallway. But just as he reached the corner, he froze. His mother's voice carried softly through the air, but there was a sadness in it that made his chest tighten. I don't know what to do. Wine was so vulnerable when I saw her yesterday. Her stepmother is forcing her to marry Wine to her pervert brother. Her father is blinded by his wife's sugar-coated words. Mrs. Kim said, on the verge of breaking into tears. He's touched Wine inappropriately so many times, and now they are forcing my poor girl to marry him. The disgust in her voice was evident. Taehyung's heart sank like a stone. He felt a wave of fury crash over him. The vein in his jaw ticked. We can't say anything, it's their personal matter. Only if Taehyung hadn't refused to marry her. His jealousy is evident, but that stupid boy will never understand his feelings. He will regret losing her. Mark my... Taehyung barged in, his fists balled by his sides. Mom, I want to marry Wine. His mother looked up in shock, her mouth slightly open. His father was no different. What? Do you know what are you saying? He nodded and sat across them with a serious expression. I want to marry Wine. I didn't realize my feelings sooner. I thought I was annoyed, but it actually hurt me. I couldn't see her tears. I would beat her friends because I was jealous. I wanted her for myself, but she would always run away from me, and I realized it all now. Mrs. Kim let out a sigh. Listen, Taehyung, this is a matter of whole life. I don't want you to marry her out of pity, sympathy, or guilt. Do you get what I am saying? Taehyung knelt, placing his hands on her knees. I know what I am saying, Mom. It isn't out of pity, guilt, or sympathy. You know me well. I would never force myself for anything that my heart doesn't accept. I'm not someone who makes a sacrifice for anything or anyone. Mr. and Mrs. Kim exchanged glances. Taehyung, Wine's mother was your mother's childhood friend. Your mother promised her she would take care of Wine. I don't want you to hurt Wine because of a weak moment. I assume you have heard what your mom said just now. Taehyung let out a sigh. Trust me, Dad. I'll never do something to hurt her. With all my heart, I want to bring her into my life. Please, Mom. Mrs. Kim nodded. I'm willing to trust you. Don't let me down. I would never, he said with a smile. Wedding day. A month had passed in the blink of an eye. Into Taehyung's disbelief, everything had fallen into place. Mrs. Kim had worked her magic, convincing Wine's father that marrying her to Taehyung was the best decision for everyone. Taehyung couldn't contain the joy bubbling in his chest ever since realizing his feelings for Wine. The world had seemed brighter, full of possibilities, and today they were finally married. Now in the quiet of their room, Taehyung sat in front of Wine, holding her both hands and resting them on his muscular chest. Her fingers trembled slightly in his, her eyes downcast, and her lips pressed into a tight line. She was so nervous that She was so nervous that he was worried she might burst into tears if he didn't release her hands soon. He couldn't help the smile tugging at the corner of his mouth as he watched her. She was adorable like this, all shy and flustered. "Why are you nervous because I'm too handsome or because you're worried I'll bite?" he said softly, leaning forward just a little. She blinked up at him, startled by his teasing. "No, I'm not, it's just..." Taehyung chuckled, tightening the grip over her hands. "It's okay, I don't mind if you think I'm handsome. I'm used to it." He winked and Mine's blush deepened, her lips parting as if she wanted to protest, but she couldn't find the right words. He tilted his head, pretending to ponder something. "You're so red. Do you blush this easily, or is it just me who has this effect on you?" "Taehyung," Mine whispered, her voice barely above was pounding in her chest, and he could practically feel her pulse quickening under his finger. "Yes, darling, I'm all ears." Her face heated as he wrapped her arms around his neck and held her by the waist. She visibly trembled in his hold. Taehyung stared at her with an affectionate gaze. "Speak up, I'm waiting," he murmured, tugging a hair strand behind her ear. Vine lowered her head, gulping hard. Taehyung grinned, letting go one of her hands. "Relax." "I thought you were scary, but..." She stopped, biting her lower lip. "But..." He passed her a questioning gaze, but she remained silent. "But I am irresistible, right?" he said teasingly. "Taehyung," he chuckled, reaching into his pocket. Okay, I won't tease you too much for now," he said as he pulled out a small velvet box. "Here, a little something for my beautiful bride," he said, placing it on her palm. Her eyes darted between him and the box, her hand shaking slightly as she opened it. Inside was a delicate bracelet, silver with tiny charms, each one representing something meaningful. Music notes, stars, and a little heart. "I thought you'd like it. It reminded me of you." Vine's blush returned full force as she looked up at him. "I don't know what to say. It's beautiful," she whispered. Taehyung leaned in, his face just inches from hers. "You're beautiful," he whispered, his voice low and husky, making her heart race even faster. For a moment, Vine's breath was caught in her throat, and she stared at him, unsure of how to respond. The air between them charged with an intensity she hadn't expected. But just when she thought her heart might burst from the pressure, Taehyung leaned back, his expression softening. "All right, I'll stop teasing you for now." He reached out, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear, his touch light and affectionate. "Listen, Mine, I know this is all of a sudden and overwhelming, but I want you to know that you'll always find me by your side. From now on, we are friends. You don't have to be nervous around me. If anything is bothering you, if you are ever unsure or worried about something, I want you to tell me, okay?" Vine's eyes softened and the tension in her shoulders seemed to ease. She nodded slowly. "I don't want to see tears in your eyes, but if you ever want to cry, I will always lend you my shoulder." Her lips parted in a small, grateful smile. "Thank you, Taehyung. Don't say my name that sweetly. I might do something to you." His eyes glistened with mischief. Vine shook her head, looking away with a smile. Taehyung leaned and kissed her eyes softly, taking her off guard. "Now why don't you change and get comfortable?" He put on the bracelet on her wrist and stepped back, scared of his awakening desires. "Okay," she said with a smile. He patted her head while she made her way to the bathroom and disappeared. Taehyung took a deep breath, running his fingers through his hair. He couldn't stop the grin that spread across his face. Time skip. Over time, Taehyung and Mine's bond had only grown stronger into something deeper, more affectionate. Taehyung couldn't help but find himself lost in her smile, her laughter, the way she lit up every room she walked into. His feelings had grown to the point where he couldn't imagine his life without her. Vine too had found her footing. Despite the hardships she had faced with her stepmother isolating her and making her do housework, Mrs. Kim had taken her under her wing, helping her pursue her dream to becoming a fashion designer. Now, Vine walked into their room carrying a sketchbook with her face glowing with excitement. Taehyung was sitting on the bed, his laptop on his lap as he typed away. But the moment he saw her, he paused, a smile already tugging at his lips. "Taehyung, can I show you something?" she asked softly, her eyes bright with anticipation. Taehyung's warm smile only grew as he set his laptop aside, giving her his full attention. Of course, come here. Wan sat beside him, holding up her sketchbook. She had been working hard at Mrs. Kim's boutique, and it showed in the design she had drawn. She beamed as she flipped through the pages, proud of her work. His affectionate gaze was stuck on her face. He felt as if everything around him stopped. So what do you think? She asked, her voice filled with hope and a touch of nervousness. Breathtakingly beautiful, he murmured. One blinked as their eyes met, and composed himself and leaned in, studying the designs carefully, looking at her, his smile soft and genuine. You have outdone yourself, Wine. These are incredible. Wine's eyes lit up, her cheeks flushing with happiness. Really, you think so? I know so. You're going to be an amazing fashion designer. I can see it already. He said, placing a hand on hers and squeezing it gently. Her heart swelled at his words, and she couldn't help but smile wider. Thank you, Taehyung. That means so much to me. Taehyung smiled, leaning in closer as his eyes gleamed with mischief. But you know, I think it's a shame you're putting all your talent into these designs. As he said, his voice dropped to a low hissing tone. Wine blinked, confused. What do you mean? I mean, you could be designing something just for me. Maybe a matching couple outfit. Taehyung's lips curled into a playful grin, his eyes twinkled with amusement as Wine's cheeks flushed at his sudden suggestion. Taehyung, she couldn't help but laugh. He chuckled, his gaze locked on her, and before she knew it, he was moving closer, his arms wrapping around her waist. Or maybe you could just wear something that will make my heart race every time I see you. Wine's blush deepened and her heart pounded as his breath brushed against her ear. You're teasing me again. She mumbled, her voice barely audible, but the way her hands trembled slightly in his grip gave away just how flustered she was. Taehyung smiled, his affection for her only growing as he watched her struggle to maintain her composure. He couldn't help himself. The way she reacted to his flirting made his heart race, and he leaned in even more, his lips dangerously close to her ear. Maybe, but you're cute when you blush. He whispered, his voice deep and intimate. Wine's breath hissed, her face now burning red, and she didn't know what to do. His teasing was relentless, and she could feel the heat radiating between them, the closeness making her heart race uncontrollably. But just as Taehyung's hand trailed up her back, ready to take things further, something in his mind clicked. He paused, his eyes widening slightly as realization hit him. He blinked, suddenly aware of how close they were and how fast his heart was beating. With a soft chuckle, Taehyung pulled away, a smile still playing on his lips. I'm sorry if I scared you. He stood up with a soft smile. Before Wine could respond, he patted her head and headed towards the bathroom. Wine blinked, sitting there in stunned silence, her heart still pounding from the intensity of the moment. A soft sigh escaped her lips, and she bit her lower lip, disappointment creeping into her chest. She hadn't expected him to stop. She didn't want him to. She couldn't tell him that she was ready to consummate their marriage. Few days later, Taehyung arrived home after a long day, feeling the familiar sense of calm that always washed over him when he walked through the door. As he stepped inside, he saw Wine sitting with Mrs. Kim in the living room, showing her something on a piece of paper. Mrs. Kim, with her discerning eye, was observing the design carefully, her brows furrowed in concentration. Wine, on the other hand, looked slightly nervous, fidgeting with the edges of the paper. He smiled to himself, walking over to them and greeting them warmly. Hey, what's going on? He asked, plopping down on the couch nearby, casually stretching out his legs. Wine looked up at him, her eyes widening when he winked playfully in her direction. Her cheeks flushed immediately, and she quickly averted her gaze, flustered by his teasing. Mrs. Kim, however, was too focused on the design to notice. You're back, Mrs. Kim said busily, but her tone quickly shifted back to more a serious one as she turned her attention back to Wine. Wine, this is the 5th time you have made the same mistake. How many times do I have to tell you to adjust the proportions here? Mrs. Kim said, her voice firm but not harsh. Wine's face fell slightly, her shoulders slumped in disappointment. She glanced over at Taehyung, and in that brief moment, he noticed her eyes glistening with unshed tears. His heart clenched painfully at the sight. He could feel each tear falling as if it were landing directly on his heart, and the urge to comfort her surged through him. He sat up straighter, interrupting Mrs. Kim gently. "I think it looks great, Mom. She's improving, you know. These things take time." Vine lowered her head, blinking away her tears. Mrs. Kim shot him a sharp look, snapping, "Taehyung, this is between Vine and me. I know what I'm doing, so you can go and mind your own business. I'll handle this." Taehyung opened his mouth to protest, but Mrs. Kim gave him a stern glance that made him back down. Reluctantly, he stood up and left the room, but not without one last look at Vine, whose tears threatened to spill. He hated seeing her like this. Later, unable to shake off the feeling, Taehyung called out from their bedroom, "Vine, can you bring me a coffee?" A few moments later, Vine walked into the room, holding a steaming cup of coffee. She set it on the table next to him, and Taehyung looked up at her, taking in how beautiful she looked in a simple outfit and a sad face. His gaze lingered a little too long, and Vine fidgeted under his chair, not quite meeting his eyes. "Sit here." He motioned to the chair across from him. Vine hesitated but did as he asked, sitting quietly with her hands in her lap. Taehyung took a deep breath, staring into the coffee before speaking. "I know my mom can be tough sometimes, but she says to heart, 'You're doing great, Vine, and if anything is bothering you, you can always talk to me. Don't hold it in.'" Vine nodded quietly, her gaze still cast down. "Thank you, but I don't feel bad. It's nothing like that." He picked up the coffee mug, offering her a small smile, and patted her head. "Thank you for the coffee." With that, he stood up and walked towards the balcony, his footsteps quiet against the wooden floor. Vine's eyes followed him, her heart sinking slightly as she watched him walk away. She had grown so used to his presence as mom, but now something was different, and it left a quiet ache in her chest as she stared at his disappearing back into the cool evening air. The next day, Vine was bustling in the kitchen preparing refreshments for his brother, who had just returned from abroad. The sound of their laughter filled the house. As she was about to bring the tray of refreshments into the living room, she stopped dead in her tracks just outside the doorway when she overheard Taehyung's brother speaking. "I still can't believe you actually married Vine. Didn't you tell Mom a few months ago that you wouldn't marry her? Because she's annoying and childish, always crying over little things. Mom wanted her to be your bride so badly. What changed? How did you end up marrying her?" Vine's heart froze. She felt her breath catch in her throat, her hands trembling slightly as she gripped the tray tighter. Her mind raced, trying to process the words she had just heard. To her horror, Taehyung's voice followed, calm and steady. "You're not wrong. I did say she was childish and annoying back then. She cried over the smallest things." Vine's heart sank deeper with every word. Her eyes beginning to sting with unshed tears, she felt a lump in her throat as she turned around with trembling feet and dragged her feet to the kitchen, tears rolling down her eyes. Her mind was clouded with hurt and confusion. Everything she had believed about their growing bond, about his affection for her, it all felt like a lie now. He didn't marry her because he wanted to. He didn't marry her because he loved her. He married her because he was forced. It rang in her mind as she stumbled upstairs. "That was because I was confused with my feelings. When we were kids, Vine would play with other kids leaving me behind, so I used to break her toys, beat her friends, and when she cried, I used to say she was annoying. It went on till we came to high school, but now I realized I was yearning for her attention. Out of jealousy, I would break her toys and beat up her friends. When I used to see her cry with Mom and Dad, I thought her tears were annoying, but I didn't realize it actually hurt me. I couldn't understand my feelings, and in reality that annoyed me." He completed in a low tone, keen, and patted his shoulder. "I'm glad you found your true feelings. Don't ever hurt Vine. Not even by mistake. She's really innocent." He nodded with a smile. "Never." Time skip. It had been 15 to 20 days since Taehyung's brother and his wife had left. But in those days, Taehyung couldn't ignore the growing distance between him and Wine. She was always distracted, her mind somewhere else, and often he caught her staring into space, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. It hurt him more than he wanted to admit, seeing her so withdrawn. But every time he thought of talking to her, she seemed busy with her design work or intentionally avoiding him. Today, Wine wasn't feeling well and had stayed home, resting in her bedroom. Taehyung had come home early, and as he entered the house, he noticed how unusually quiet everything was. Wine? He called softly, his voice echoing through the hallway. Wine, hearing his voice, quickly wiped her tear-streaked face, hoping he wouldn't notice her distress. She stood up, about to leave her room, but Taehyung appeared in the doorway, his expression more serious than she had ever seen. His eyes softened when they met hers, and before she could utter a word, he gently took hold of her wrist. Wait, we need to talk. Wine's heart raced, her pulse quickening as Taehyung closed the door behind him. He led her back to the bed and sat her down, sitting next to her, holding her hand in his. The warmth of his touch made Wine's resolve crumble, and tears began to well up in her eyes once again, just from the simple act of being close to him after so many days of distance. Taehyung's brow furrowed, his thumb gently brushing her tear-stained cheeks as he wiped her face, his voice laced with concern. What's going on, Wine? I have noticed your unusual behavior ever since Keenan had come. If there's something bothering you, can talk to me. Is it about Mom? She quickly shook her head. No, it's not Mom. Taehyung's confusion deepened. He held her face. Then what is it? If she's being too hard on you, I'll talk to her. You shouldn't take it to heart. No, it's not her. She locked her teary eyes into him. It's you, she whispered. Taehyung's eyes widened in surprise, and he blinked at her, momentarily speechless. Me? What do you mean? Wine's tears fell freely now, her voice trembling as she tried to explain. Why did you marry me, Taehyung? All our lives you have hated me. You broke my toys, you beat up my friends, you yelled at me when I cried. In those weak moments, I almost forgot how our relationship was. You didn't want me. I know you didn't. That's not true. Taehyung started, but Wine cut him off, her sobs growing louder. She pushed his hands. I know your mom forced you. I heard what you said to your brother. You said I was childish and annoying. Taehyung's heart sank as her words hit him like a wave of guilt. He hadn't realized just how much she had been hurting, and now seeing her like this, so vulnerable and heartbroken, made him feel like the worst person in the world. No, Wine, it's nothing like that. That I heard Mom's conversation saying your stepmom is forcing you to marry her pervert. Wine cut in with wide eyes. So you married me out of pity, out of sympathy. Not because you wanted to. Now I understand. You used to flirt with me and be all sweet just to not make me feel bad. You didn't want me. That's why you have been distant. You have been pretending, trying to befriend, but you don't want me. I'm not stupid. She said between hiccups, then let out a long, heavy sigh, his heart aching as he watched her crumble before him. He gently pulled her closer, his arms wrapping around her trembling body as she sobbed into his chest. He held her tightly, his heart breaking as he felt her pain. He rested his chin atop her head. Why, you got it wrong. It's no. She tried to pull away from him, but he held her firmly, his hands gently cradling her face as he looked deep into her teary eyes. I never hated you. I married you because I liked you. I did say you were annoying and childish, but that was because I was confused with my feelings. I thought your tears annoyed me, but it actually hurt me. On our wedding day, I decided to take everything slow and give you some space because I knew you feared me. I'm distant not because I don't want you, but because I couldn't control myself from making you mine completely. I want to do everything with your mutual consent. I was scared of insolence. I can't keep my hands off you when I'm near you. I feel like breaking all the boundaries and marking you mine. Wine's breath hitched, her heart racing as she listened to him in a daze. He leaned closer, his forehead gently resting against hers, their breaths mingling in the small space between them, forehead against hers and closing his eyes. I love you, Wayne. I don't know how alone my feelings became so strong for you. I can't imagine my life without you. Her tears slowed, her heart fluttering at his words. Taehyung pressed a long kiss to her forehead. Wayne's hands gripped his shirt tightly as she buried her face into his chest, her sobs turning into quiet sniffles. Taehyung held her for a long moment, his hands gently stroking her back, comforting her with every soft touch. When she finally pulled back, her eyes were still red and puffy. Taehyung smiled softly, wiping the last of her tears away with his thumb. I thought I would be the last person to make you cry, but here you are torturing your eyes because of me. He whispered, kissing her eyes. I told you if there's anything, talk to me. I was too overwhelmed to talk. He kissed her temple and pressed his forehead against hers. No more misunderstandings. She nodded, leaning into his warmth. For the first time in weeks, she felt lighter. The heaviness of her doubts and insecurities slowly melting away. Taehyung pulled back slightly, just enough to look into her eyes, a playful smile tugging at the corner of his lips. You know, you look kinda cute when you cry, he said teasingly while let out a small embarrassed laugh, her cheeks flushing red. Don't say that, she muttered, sweating his chest slightly, her face growing warmer under his teasing gaze. He chuckled, the deep sound sending a shiver down her spine as he tilted her chin up gently with his fingers, his eyes locking onto hers. I'm serious. Those puffy eyes, that little pout, it's almost too adorable to handle. His voice dropped, Wayne's blush deepened, and she tried to turn her face away, but Taehyung wouldn't let her. His hand cupped her cheek, gently bringing her gaze back to him, his thumb tracing the outline of her jaw. Stop teasing me, she whispered, though her voice lacked any real protest. Her heart was beating so loudly she was sure he could hear it. I can't help it. You're too easy to tease, Wayne. Look at you blushing like crazy. It's cute. Taehyung smiled, his other hand brushing a stray lock of hair behind her ear. Wayne bit her lip, trying to suppress the smile, threatening to break out on her face, but it was of no use. She could feel her pulse quicken as he leaned in closer, his breath warm against her skin. And the way you look at me, it makes me want to. He trailed off, his lips brushing ever so lightly against her temple, sending sparks shooting through her body. Wayne's breath hissed as his fingers continued their gentle caress along her jawline, his touch so light, yet so electrifying. She couldn't stop the butterflies from swarming in her stomach, and her eyes fluttered shut for a moment, savoring the closeness, the warmth of his body against hers. Taehyung's lips moved lower, planting a feather-light kiss on her cheek, his thumb still stroking her skin. You know, I didn't think you could get any cuter, but I was wrong. Every time I look at you, I fall for you all over. You make me go on my knees. Wayne's eyes snapped open. She let out a soft, flustered laugh. You're impossible, she muttered, but there was no bite to her words. Her heart was too full, too overwhelmed by how close he was. Taehyung grinned, and before she could react, he gently pushed her back onto the bed, hovering above her with that same teasing smirk. Impossible? I think you mean irresistible. He corrected, his tone light and playful. Wayne's eyes widened as she looked up at him, her heart pounding in her chest. Hey, what are you doing? She screamed, her face turning an even deeper shade of red. Taehyung chuckled, leaning down to press a quick kiss to the tip of her nose. Just making sure you're not going to cry again. Can't have my wife being sad, can I? He teased, his eyes sparkling with amusement. Wayne's heart melted at the way he said my wife, the tenderness in his voice making her feel like she was the only person in the world. Her hands instinctively moved to his chest, her fingers brushing against the soft fabric of his shirt as she tried to push him away, though it was a half-hearted effort. You're being so annoying, she mumbled, though she couldn't stop the smile that spread across her face. I thought I was irresistible. He teased again, leaning down to kiss her forehead, this time lingering for a moment before pulling back just enough to look into her eyes. You're both. She admitted softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Her fingers curled into the fabric of his shirt, holding him close. Taehyung's gaze softened, and for a moment, the teasing melted away, replaced by something deeper. His thumb brushed gently across her cheek once again, his eyes full of warmth as he looked at her. I'm sorry, Wine, for everything. I won't let you feel like that again. He murmured, his voice low and sincere. Wine's heart swelled, and she nodded. I know. Then smiled softly, leaning down once more to press his lips to hers in a slow, tender kiss. It wasn't rushed or full of passion. It was gentle, a promise in itself. His way of telling her that he was there, that he cared. When he pulled away, his forehead rested against hers, their breaths mingling in the space between them. You stuck with me, annoying or not, he whispered, his lips brushing against hers as he spoke. Wine let out a soft giggle, her arms wrapping around his neck as she pulled him closer. I think I can handle that. She whispered back, her heart full and light, feeling more at peace in his arms than she had in a long time. And in that moment, as they lie there together, wrapped in each other's warmth, all the misunderstandings and doubts seemed to fade away, replaced by the quiet certainty that they were exactly where they were meant to be.